When Frank asked me to talk about this, he gave me the topic interfaces. That was it. And I was just sitting there, okay, what can I do with that? But I thought, okay, let's reminisce a bit of what I've done over the last 20, 25 years as a web developer and what interfaces I built. And what I realized is the biggest mistake of what people are doing when it comes to building things for the web. So a bit of background. 1997, I built my first website. I basically did, as Frank said, programming on 8-bit computers before that, and a few other, like, tried to do some C++ and stuff like that. And it didn't gel with me. I was working at a radio station back then as a newscaster, and I found the internet, and I'm like, this is cool. I can take part in that with programming and meet people socially, which is not good for a programmer in normal life. So I thought it would be a good thing to play in that internet. So I built my first website, got a company interested, and they got me into the place where I got into the content management system world, the enterprise level, government, business to consumer, worked on a few bank sites, like all big business sites, interfaces that back then nobody really knew what the web was like and what we should be doing. And I worked on Yahoo's website, like one of the biggest ones out there, and internationally, and traveled quite early because of my job as well. Because for some reason, when you work internationally on the internet, connected web with different countries, you always have to travel to different offices and sit next to other people in a computer. That was before COVID. Now everybody realizes it. There's possible things to do differently. I then pivoted to supporting developers instead of being a developer myself. And that way I came into the blogging and writing and into the evangelism space and the tech evangelism, developer evangelism handbook that I've written about that as well. And then I pivoted into working on browsers and developer tools because I wanted to actually see the things that I always wanted to have. I wanted what's going on there. When you start as a web developer in the 90s, you were just, computers were these interesting things, browsers were these black holes. You had no idea how these things worked. People wouldn't answer your emails. You couldn't even contact people about it. And that's why it was interesting to work on Firefox and subsequently on the Chromium project, where all the browser software is open source and everything happens in public and all the things are standardized, not like they used to be in the beginning. And now for 6 years at Microsoft, I'm a principal program manager, and my job is to make sure that people can build things with all the tools on the web, working with other browsers and other environments as well. So let's talk about web interfaces. What is the biggest mistake people make when it comes to the web? And one thing I happened to see over and over and over again over the years is that people optimize for a single form factor. They always take the du jour technology and think that is the web. I remember it was best in Internet Explorer at 800 by 600 resolution minimum. I still see websites that do these kind of things, especially local government, that expect you to use an outdated technology from 16 years ago, optimized for BlackBerry, needs an iPhone, at least wireless. People always think one form factor that's actually hot right now, and most of the time the form factor where people spend the most money is where people actually should spend their time building for. But the thing about the web is that the web is fluid. It's basically a fluid. It gives you the content, and you as the end user are in control of actually getting the experience that you need. And this is not for you to mess around with it. This is for you to actually work around physical problems that you have or connectivity problems. The great thing about the web is that with browsers nowadays, you have fully in control of changing the interface to something that you need. And that's something that I want to talk about right now, how we can embrace this much more. Responsive design has been around for like 10, 12 years now, I think as well. And it basically means you don't fix your interface. You don't fix it to a certain size. You expect that people can actually change the font sizes. You expect that people use a mobile phone, a desktop, and a tablet, or a dog or a cat, or wherever the internet is running on these days. And your design should do something or should actually change according to that need. And that's great. I mean, I love that I can open a website and get a one column thing on my mobile phone and then get 3 columns on my 12 monitors that I have at home, which is wonderful. But simple basics are still forgotten. This is normally when you start an HTML document. You use your doc type, you define the language. That's important because for translation and also for a screen reader to read it out to you, because you don't want a German website to be read by an English voice and so on and so forth. You define your character set, so none of these question marks show up. You give it a title, and that's that. But there's already a problem in here. And you can see that on the first line, there's this little red squiggly under that doctype HTML. This is how I've set up my editor to tell me when something is going wrong. And what's going wrong there is actually not in the doctype itself, but it found that in the whole head, there's no viewport element. The viewport element tells the document that it should resize itself according to what space it can have. And I don't have a viewport element, so my editor, while I'm programming it, tells me that something is going wrong. That's a product called WebHint, which is an integration, a plugin for several editors, but also a service that you can run documents against. It gives you all these compatibility issues, performance issues, accessibility issues, and it tells you while you're doing things that you're doing something wrong. And that's something we never had before. That's something that we do something, we do some testing, we get it back, and then we realize we've done it wrong. And I love that we have interfaces nowadays as developers that tell us immediately when we're doing something wrong. So putting that viewport element in there with device width and initial scale 1.0 makes a huge difference, because out of a sudden, I can read the Daria site on my mobile phone and it doesn't scroll sideways. Because scrolling sideways and up is not fun, but it's something that we also have to deal with. The users will have to do that. But if the viewport element is not defined at all, then this will never work. And it's incredible how many websites don't do that one simple thing that's been around since 2001, something like that. And login websites on hotels and wireless login sites where you have to scroll like all the way the screen just to get somewhere is painful. But the great thing about responsive design is that you actually can design for all these experiences. But I think it's also important to consider that the next interface that comes into responsiveness is the content that you send to the device and the content that you make people consume. So it's easy to reflow content to smaller devices. So when you have like a three column layout, you can show them one under the other. If that means that people have to scroll 90,000 pixels, it's not really a good experience, though. It's also important to understand the use cases, though, itself. Like, why would I do that on a mobile phone? What do I do on a mobile phone when I go to a restaurant website? I will probably not want to see that 60 meg video of what your restaurant looks like. When I do it on my mobile phone, I want to have the address, I want to have a button to order things, and I want to give you a call. That's basically it. These should be the first things in that interface, not what you think is important to show to your clients, but what the clients are actually looking for. And this is true responsiveness to me. A real responsive interface give me in context use cases. So I get off the train and it actually tells me in 5 minutes you're at the train station. Here are the next things where you can go, rather than like look at map of station and try to find your way around as well. The in contextness of interfaces these days, especially mobile, is wonderful to do if you do it right. Hiding things doesn't mean they don't get loaded. I mean, nowadays connectivity is getting better and better, even in Germany. And it still fascinates me how some websites send you like 10 meg of data and show you 3 paragraphs and a small image. And the rest is just in the background, hidden away and just loaded. And you can do many things to not give that data to people, which means they don't have to wait for long and they have no problem when there's bad connectivity. And mobile experience should be a lot more about doing than about consuming. And that to me is also the definition of an app. It's always fascinating when people say, I don't want to do a website, I want to have an app. And an app to me is a do thing, where a website is a read thing and do thing. Like the app is there for me to interact with it and then go away from it and not use it again. It's, of course, Facebook and others are addiction machines that lock you into them and make sure that you never ever get out again. So they give you everything. But mobile experience to me should be a lot more about doing. The task is much more important than the content of it. So on the web, you always have to cater to an unknown audience of diverse needs. And that's great because it means you can achieve audiences that you never thought you had. There's a great example in New York. There was a dating site where they wanted to do a group dating experience and it failed completely. So in the first half year, it got like 60,000 users, which for a dating site is ridiculously low. And then they realized that a lot of people from Eastern Asian countries are actually, and Arabic countries are actually starting to connect, and India especially as well, are connecting to their website and trying to use the system and signing up for it. And they were wondering why that was, because it was a very much a New York website. But then they realized that group dating, like the website was advertising to go out for dinner with 5 or 6 people rather than couples, was the big thing that actually changed that. So they pivoted to the Indian market and became the #1 dating site there, because they realized, like, they looked at data coming in and realized the audience is there. We just didn't find it because we thought we just do it something for the American market. Something in chat? Okay, cool. So currently, I'm working on documentation. We have a great documentation platform. It's all Markdown, all on GitHub, and I'm documenting a lot of things that I always wanted to document because I didn't find it myself. And the great thing about documentation is that it's basically images and text and structure. Structure, incredibly important, headings, lists, links, these kind of things. But when you have something that has a lot of text, browsers nowadays, and especially in this case, Microsoft Edge here, give you a mode that actually allows you to read them in an easier fashion. So while everything on the screen makes sense when I need it, I actually just want to come for the article, right? I just want to do that. And that's actually okay on a website like that. If I go to CNN.com or I go to any news website, I get that much text and that much advertising and 15 automatically playing videos that I didn't ask for. But the content is really not where I want it to be. That is annoying for me. But if I'm now somebody with dyslexia or somebody with another learning disability, then finding that content is absolutely impossible for me. If I'm a blind user that listens to the website and uses a screen reader to navigate it, I have to navigate through thousands of elements that I don't need to get to the content where I want to. And that's why browsers nowadays have this thing called reader mode. In this case, it's I can't remember what the name of it is right now. It's that icon. So when you click on it, you actually get into a mode that takes the biggest chunk of text and displays it for you like in an ebook. And you have all kind of opportunities to change things around. You can change the colors, you can have the column style, you can change the text type, the text spacing, and the text size. Everything to your needs. So you can actually take any website out there and make it much easier to read that way. And I often use that when I get these like 25 things you didn't know about, where there's lots of ads around it and they split it up into 15 pages. The easy reader mode actually shows me that directly in one page. And that's really nice to have. It actually has things like grammar tools for people with dyslexia that you can actually have little dots in between the different syllables of the text. And you can even colorize what is a verb, what is a noun, and what is an adjective. And that's actually, it feels like overkill, but it's actually very necessary for a few people that actually have a condition where this would make it much easier for them to learn it. So we put that reader mode in there very much for the education space, especially for school children and also for people who are low of reading level and actually just learn new languages as well. Because another very interesting thing is in there is that you can have a setting that you can say, give me an image what that word means. So the setting is called, I can't remember right now, but basically it gives you a little like magic wand. And when you click on a word, it shows you an image what that one means. So in this case, cover, it's the lid of a pot, and problems, people scratching their head and having a math thing next to them. So that's something that I would never build for my website, but as it is text and as it's available and I didn't hide it in something else, the browser can do these things for me. So people might consume your product in that fashion. I get lots of people from countries where I don't speak the language, look at my website because they translate it. You also have a single reading mode. That's something that I built for myself in the website years ago. I had it on my blog actually as an option where it blacks out the rest of the page or darkens out the rest of the page, and you only see the one line that you're in right now, which is great for speed reading, but it's also very necessary for people who get distracted by all kinds of things going on the screen there. Picture Dictionary is the name of the mode. And you can translate it into different languages. This is Azerbaijani, and I hope it's Azerbaijani. Automated translation, we had that earlier, is always a bit of a hit and miss, but it's quite interesting to see. It's fascinating because my partner right now, I bought her a computer and she set it up to translate everything into German. So I kept filing bugs to Netflix and others saying like that the title of the movie is absolutely wrong and the description is unreadable. And then I realized it was actually the computer doing it for her. And actually it wasn't Netflix website, it was just the computer directly. So she should have told me that, but that's okay. Read aloud is another interesting thing. So it reads the page out to you in synthesized voices, and you got lots and lots of voices to choose from. A lot of them are ML powered now, so they sound really good. They do things like inflection. They stop at a full stop. They do a slight hesitation at a comma. They actually go up higher when they're at the end of a question mark, and it highlights the word that's happening right now as well. So sometimes when I'm a train, I'm using the reading mode and my headphones and just let it stand there. And instead of reading and scrolling and sitting like this, I just let it do it and read it out myself. And any website can do that now. So other things people need to be able to do to your interfaces that you cannot block them from. Legally, you cannot block them from, and you shouldn't because it's not a good thing to do. Is dark and light mode is a big thing that just came around the last few years. And it's basically black on white or white on black. And there's lots of things going around, like that the dark mode is better for your eyes, it's less tiring. It's like there are benefits to each of them. And I think it's interesting that when you change your whole operating system to dark or light, then your product in the browser should also reflect that. And it's pretty easy to test that because there's a CSS feature that you can actually try that out and find it out that way. And it became much more important for people. And I got a lot of thank you emails when I put a dark mode on my blog because I thought people don't read it any longer, but apparently they still do. And accessibility in general is a huge topic of mine that I've been working on for years and years now as well, because I think the web is for everybody. It's not for just people with the fastest connection with a really cool computer that can read and write, that actually have no cognitive issues. It's for everybody. And there's a lot of people that actually are blind developers that I know, or blind writers that I know that are incredibly good in what they do, better than me in programming. And I'm just standing there. This is great that technology enables people like that. And you can do things that blocks them out, and that's not a good thing to do. So there's inverting colors, there's reducing motion. Motion is a very important part. Animations can really help guide a user to something, but it can also distract people and even cause nausea. So there is, again, a setting you can read out in your code to see if users don't want animation, and if you don't want animation, don't show any animation. It's as simple as that. There's also increased contrast. This is something that automatically happens. So when you change increased contrast in your operating system, it changes all the colors of your web products directly to these colors if you didn't hard code them or made them really hard to change. So it's something that is interesting to test because 6% of Windows users are actually relying on high contrast mode to even use the web. And it's a really important thing that nobody tests for because most people don't know. I'm happy to say that in the next version of the developer tools, we're going to have a high contrast simulator. So you don't need to change your operating system around. You can just press a button and see what your web product would look like in high contrast as well. And then you have zoom levels. We always get like very excited when we just zoom the font up and nothing breaks. Good. But zoom levels go up to 400%, where people see like that much of a screen this big and they move around with it, which is then always fascinating when people use like lots of white space in their designs. And you see a person needing that scrolling for like 5 minutes until they get to the next link or they get to the next interactive element. So it's very important to consider this as well. Voice recognition is something that's coming up as well in operating systems. It used to be on mobile for quite a while. So people will control your website by talking to it. Not that your website needs to do something about it, but it would say like activate third link or go to a form entry field, enter this. And people do that. It's an infancy to a degree, but I think it's very interesting that it's coming as well. And of course, screen readers, people that cannot see or people that cannot see only a small part of the screen, use a software that reads out to them what's happening on the screen. And if your HTML is not the right format, they don't know what that is. They cannot actually tell that this is a heading, that this is a list, and they cannot navigate it that way. So that's something to really consider as well. The good news is that you can do a lot of this whilst you create your interfaces. As I showed you before, editors nowadays, like environments where you develop things, give you these hints that you're doing something wrong. And the squiggly line in the text editor, but that also includes Office, that includes PowerPoint. All of them have like an accessibility check button that you can click and you can see what you've done wrong or what you missed out on, like an alternative text for an image for people to actually use your interfaces. So set up your development environment tools to check for accessibility issues while you develop. Like in the Office environment or something that's already in there, but in most editors, you have to turn it on or actually create an an extension or have an extension. Use the tools to simulate different environments. Mess around with your product, resize it to ridiculous sizes, change the colors around, look at it in high contrast view and see if everything still makes sense or if something is very much not obvious to people anymore. Because any user you block out could be a very important person that your interface could actually be a success for. The visual overlays to recognize obvious problems like missing alternative text or lacking contrast. That's really good as well. So you can hover over something and it tells you when something is wrong. Or you have accessibility insights, which is another product that puts red lines around everything that doesn't have alternative text. Or the squiggly line again in the editor that I'm having here. They're all built into the browsers you use to consume the web. So in Firefox, there's some of them, in Chromium and in Edge especially where I'm working on right now, we add more and more of those. Safari has some as well. Every browser comes with developer tools. And often people don't know it. And when they accidentally open it, they freak out because they think their computer has been hacked. But it's basically F12 or Command-Shift-I in every browser. You can actually start opening the developer tools and playing around with things. One thing, for example, you can use the inspect button to get around the page and learn about all the different elements that you have on that page. So in this case, this is a link and it tells me the color of the link. It tells me the font, the padding, the margin if it has it. And the accessibility is really interesting here. It shows me the contrast is high enough. So it has that green check mark. It would be an exclamation mark if the contrast is not big enough. You have to change the color because people might not be able to read it. It has a name of cats and a row of links. So that way, you know that is actually a link. So a screen reader would say like link cats. And it's keyboard focusable. Again, it has the check mark. If it doesn't have the check mark, people with a keyboard cannot access it. And that's terrible because people that, for example, can't see won't use a mouse. They would probably use the keyboard. I use a keyboard for most of the time because it's much faster than a mouse as well. So these are just overlays that immediately give you that information. You also have the accessibility tab on the bottom where this would be listed out as well, but in a less readable fashion. We're working on that one as well. You get all kind of like information in the HTML as well next to it, with what is what. But it's interesting to see that just by hovering over it, you can do a preliminary check if everything is okay. You also have an issues tab where it went through it and tested the product that's open right now and tells you, for example, that form elements must have labels, because if a screen reader goes to that form element, it wouldn't know what the form element is unless the label tells it that this is about search. Images must have alternative text, and users might have difficulty reading due to insufficient color contrast. So if you click through any of those, you get like a link to the, you highlight the element in your HTML and you get explanations where you can learn more in case you get confused. And that to me is a huge interface aspect as well. Like not only tell me that something went wrong, but also tell me where I can learn more or tell me why something went wrong and not just like there's an error, fix it. And I'm like, I feel confused. I don't know how to fix it. Again, there's a squiggly line as well. So if you just look at the HTML, you can click on that one as well and you get directly to that view to explanations why that is a problem and how to fix it. You can also simulate different environments. You can emulate, for example, color deficiency, color blindness. And in this case, it actually changes the chronotopia, which is you can't see red. And you can see how different people with different color blindness would see your website. You can also just use blurred vision. You can do that by squinting or taking off your glasses as well. But this is much easier. And it's actually, that's not only for people who cannot see properly, but also when you're on your mobile phone in the sun, it would be the same experience. So if you cannot see things properly here, then you made a mistake. In this case, the cool drop shadow that I have on the navigation there, adopter pad, is actually not helping in that blurred view because it actually makes it more readable in an unblurred fashion, but when it's blurred, it actually is in the way. We also had a cross-reference where we can actually say like, what accessibility aspect do you want to check, which feature of developer tools, and where's the article that explains it. So there's an overview of all the things that you can use for free. You don't need to install anything. You don't need to know anything. You just need to open the developer tools in the browser and look at the product. And you can also use that to file complaints to people and file bugs when you find issues that way. If you don't want to read and you want to make me happy as well, I've got a video class on Skillshare on that one, which I'm going to send out the link, or we're going to send out the link with that one as well. I also have a few free invites. It's free for 3 months to sign up, and then you can just read the whole thing as well. But I'm not going to go through the like click and subscribe. I'm just very happy that they came up with me and actually asked me to do a course about accessibility, because it's kind of hard to get that content sold out there. Like if you talk about the coolest newest technologies, people want to make you do courses, but how to make interfaces available for all people with all kind of different needs isn't as interesting for a lot of education places. But they came over, they gave me a film. We got everything out of my flat, because I live in my one room flat right now. We had like 2 cameras here, a boom mic and everything. It was just amazing. But it's actually a really like 45-minute going through everything that you can do to make sure you find problems in your issues. A few things to consider when it comes to accessibility testing, though, is that you cannot automate it. There's no software that can actually say, I make your stuff accessible. There's a big discussion on like overlays, they're called right now, where a lot of companies say like, we're using AI to analyze your interface and we make it available to people with all kinds of disabilities. That's nonsense. And it's actually really, really wasting your money. This is a human issue. A lot of accessibility problems come in the interaction. They don't come immediately in just looking at the document. So no overlay or software can do that for you. You have to, if you can really do it, test it with real people with real issues. The earlier you test, the less you have to fix later. That's the same with like design, with any kind of user research, but you cannot tack on accessibility at the end of it. You have to do it from the start, then it actually works out. It's tempting to test things to make you feel good. So resizing twice is good, but it's not what a student user needs. So researching what a user of different environments or different software needs is an interesting part to get started there. And you will most likely test things not the way people who need that feature will. So if possible, get tested and use diverse needs. Screen readers have an amazing amount of keyboard shortcuts that people use. I have no idea what all of them are. So it's actually really, really good to see somebody who's actually using that thing day to day to do that testing for you. So it's pretty much better than just trying it yourself. My favorite is when people start using screen readers to test themselves and keep their screens on. And you're like, that's not the idea. You're not supposed to see the interface. You're just supposed to hear it. If it doesn't work if it works while you see it, you haven't fixed it. So that's the big problem there. Covering accessibility needs, however, yields great results for everybody. And I think it's always very annoying when people say, I have to do accessibility. And I'm like, no, you think about users with different needs, and that way your interface becomes better for everybody else there as well. Video captioning, for example, allows for faster navigation through training materials. Like we have a transcript where you can click on the part that you want to jump to the video rather than having timestamps. You can actually search a transcript and search the video that way. And that's something that isn't possible in a video editing environment as it is right now. You could learn languages better with subtitles on. When I grew up in Germany, I learned English by watching Monty Python. That was the only show that wasn't original with subtitles. And then later on, I watched every English show with English subtitles. So I had the comparison between pronunciation and text. And that way I learned much better. The same way when you're in a gym or in a pub and there's a program running in the background with captioning on, you can still understand it, although the bartender and music is blaring. It's for everybody, not only for people who are hard of hearing. Alternative text of images can get translated and indexed for search as well. So instead of having an image that has a text in it, and I have no idea about, if the alternative text says the same thing, I can still hear it in another language while the text is still in English. But in general, don't do text in images. Often you simplify interfaces by making them more accessible, and this makes it better for everybody out there. So finding that you don't want to tap 15 times with a keyboard and make that button a bit bigger, made it easier on a mobile device as well. You also got invisible interfaces. I alluded to that a bit with the alternative text and also the captionings and these kind of things. But one big thing that actually any web product nowadays needs to understand is that people are not using search engines to go to your website any longer and actually just find them and spend in there. People are taking context and taking it out there, putting it into Facebook or LinkedIn, TikTok videos, cats, dogs, wherever. So you got to make sure that your content is actually linkable and it is understandable to people. So how easy it is to share your product online is a big success factor of how it's actually there. And this is an interface that needs programming. So you need to have these meta elements in there. You need to have images in there for different platforms to display. And there's lots and lots of editors online for that create images and videos for social media. check your social media share preview. So you can put a URL in there and it shows you how it shows up in LinkedIn and Twitter and whatever. And this is important because this is where a lot of people are coming from and new users are coming from. So it's something that search engine optimization used to be, and it's still a very important part of what your content is there. So it's, if your HTML is already accessible, if it's translatable, you're 90% of the way there. But having an image that shows people where they're going to go when they click on it, that's going to be more exciting for them just to think that link is the right thing. So interfaces to me should not expect people to be experts, but turn them into experts over time. This is getting into the tooling space where I work right now, and it's fascinating to me when we took on the Chromium developer tools. This is what they look like. 10 years of developers adding more features that were good at the idea at that time, and having tab panels inside tab panels with like carousels in carousels and links pointing to each other. It's huge. And there's a lot of tools in there that are totally unloved and nobody uses them, but they've been in there for 10 years. And if you touch them, two very loud people on Twitter complain about it. But it's important that we understand that this is not a good experience. This is basically overwhelming. And it's also arrogant to expect that everybody who wants to become a developer expects that kind of interface. So we're working on making it a bit easier. The first thing I thought, documenting it, writing lots of good documents, easy documentation. Nobody cares. A lot of people come. It's not bad, but it's not a replacement for an interface that explains itself. Every time we added a button or we added an explanation to the interface itself, saying like, do this to do that, like a form saying like your name and first name, just having a first name and last name in there to show you what the format is that's expected is a very, very simple thing to do. Documentation is the last place we go once we have exceeded everything else. We go on Google, we search for something, we go on Stack Overflow, we ask random people on Facebook, and then we go to the official documentation because it's much more obviously that's nothing that normal people do. So it's good to have it. It's very important to have it. But I also found that when it comes to a linguistic interface, that documentation in this case should be very much to the point and giving you what you came for, and not be inviting, frothy, or really cool or exciting like you do like a beginning pop-up page, the first page of your document or a product. This should be just people coming here are already annoyed. They already don't know how something's going, so we should give them the immediate interface. But I thought, what could we do better? And this is something that we're coming up with right now, which is called a focus mode. So in this one, we have different icons. They're going to be text as well. So we understand that not every icon translates into every social environment as well. So in this case, this is home, but then you can go for web development and it will turn off all the tools you don't need and only give it the ones that you need. You have a debugging where it only gives you the debugging view with only 2 or 3 tools. Performance and resizing, all kind of like different needs, and you can also set them for yourself. So we thought that was a much better way to get people to just use the things that they need to use rather than just trying to find their way around. So that's something that we're working on in general, also in documents and these kind of things. Always a good idea to consider that. Another thing is interactive context explanation. So if you click the question mark with the help button, you can roll over different parts of the interface and get explanations what these tools are and what they do. We're also thinking about embedding a little video or an animation there to tell you what's going on there. And this is all not only meant to help us, but also to get people to not be afraid of technology, to not be afraid of using a tool to develop other things, but hold them by the hand and say like, this actually does that. Don't worry if you don't know it now, you will be in the nearer future. So it's going to be interesting to go. Another part that we're doing right now is going where people already are. So Visual Studio Code is the main editor tool for everybody out there right now. It's the biggest successful thing on GitHub. It's open source, it's free, and it's available for every platform. So we thought a lot of people are actually coding in there and then debugging in the browser. Why? Why don't we just use the debugging tools of the browser and embed them in the editor? So we made an extension to bring the tools over to the editor. So you do all your writing needs here, and in the browser, you only see what the final thing is. So you can actually debug in one experience and into another. There's no context switching. Context switching is it seems not much, but it's actually very, very hard on our brain to jump from one context to another. And another big thing that was successful for us, and in general, also for any government website or anything out there, and feedback channel that does a lot of stuff for you. So in our case, you can press that feedback button and you can open the feedback dialog, enter the feedback. It did a screenshot for you. It gave the URL that we are on right now. You can send diagnostic data if you want to. You can include an email and you can send the button through. And we're getting 90% of new features that we're building right now, or things that we want. We get through that kind of feedback where we find out where they got stuck, what problems they had, where they didn't find things. And of course, there's 80% noise. And we're using a lot of machine learning to sift through the things that are spam or people wanting help or whatever. It's just fascinating because we took it out of the main browser. We only have it in developer tools. So we get a lot of questions like, can you remove my photo from Facebook? And I'm like, no, I can't. But it's interesting how much power they think is behind a button like that if Microsoft is a company behind it. Reading that feedback and comparing it with usage data brings interesting results. One thing we got complaints about a lot was that people accidentally closed these tabs. So they clicked these little X icons and by accident. They didn't want to click them and they didn't know how to go back to the network tool once they closed it. And it was weird to us because it actually seems big enough and it seems to be good until we realized that we actually look at the source of the feedback. Where do the people come from that actually complained about that? And it was the Chinese market and any other market that doesn't have an alphabet, but glyphs like this one. So in that case, the networking tool is 2 glyphs, but the one next to it is 1 glyph. So it's very easy to accidentally close that. We wouldn't have known that if we just didn't test it in that language, which we didn't, and maybe we should have. But a lot of people gave us feedback and gave us their time, and now we actually added some spacing around it, and the numbers went down as well. The same with people accidentally opening the developer tools and saying, like, our computer has been hacked. What's going on there? I don't want this kind of stuff. Can you remove it? We now make it the first time you accidentally press F12, you actually ask you, hey, do you want to really open the developer tools, or is this something that's by accident and never do it again? And that one made a lot more happy users. It really killed our usage numbers. A lot of people that accidentally opened it are not opening anymore, but these are unhappy users. I don't want them in my KPIs. I just want the people that actually came for what they wanted to have. So building the perfect interface is absolutely impossible. I absolutely love that meme I found the other day. The UI is quite simple. Client will easily figure it out. It's like hold your finger and you see the person holding his finger rather than holding the finger on the screen to do the finger reader thing. But yeah, you expect these kind of things. And being behind a two-way mirror in user testing is sometimes incredibly painful, but also very, very interesting to see, oh, I didn't know you can do it wrong that way. Okay, I had a thought about that. So an interesting way to get more interface elements or to change your interface to the needs of your users is outsourcing it, not to a third party, but actually to plugins and add-ons. Edge browser has add-ons, Visual Studio has add-ons, Visual Studio Code, Firefox has add-ons, and the Office space has add-ons. Add-ons are, I have a hate-love relationship with add-ons because they give you all the features that people want, and we can learn from those what people really need and actually make them obsolete. And most of the time it's a communication with the add-on editor then as well to get some payout or something. But they're also the number one reason for bad performance of browsers and security issues. So a lot of like download videos from YouTube extensions basically say do illegal things are basically in the background, including malware or mining Bitcoin or these kind of things. So it's a very big attack factor for performance and security. But at the same time, we learned so much from extensions. And every interface that I know, every content management system, every product that actually allows people to extend it in some way, with the simplest of languages. You don't have to be a programmer, make something a wizard. You can click your own extension together. Became a huge success because of that. Visual Studio Code became this meteoric success that it is because it's a very basic editor, a well-done editor in the middle of it with lots and lots of add-ons and extensions to make it to the thing that you need right now, rather than assuming we know what people need. So it's quite interesting. I like that the sun is down. I got this waffle on my face now. That's quite amazing if you think about it. So the best interfaces I've seen actually are based on keeping them as open to change as possible. Embrace the squishiness of the medium. Don't fix any sizes. You can forget about that. Just by translating a website, you realize that that button doesn't have the space that it was there. I remember one of my first jobs, I had a graphical button to do for a company in Munich back then. And it said like, wir, us, in German. And then they said like, oh, we had a discussion with upper management and we now want to call it Unternehmen und Unternehmensgruppeleitung. So they wanted me to put that on a button 50 pixels wide. So I ended up making a scrolling button and they didn't like it much, but it was the only way to explain to them that this is not how you do things for the web. You make it possible for things to actually fill the space that they need and your layouts to change accordingly. And with Flexbox and Grid and other new technologies on the web, it's much, much easier than it used to be. Providing in-context help and documentation is super powerful. Documentation is great, but it doesn't help if people can't find it. If you actually have a problem and you can press a button and go to the right space in the documentation in your interface, then you have a big success on your hand. Allowing for feedback without being pushy. Don't ask people for every single sentence like, you remember Clippy, like, it seems like you're writing a letter. Do you need help with that? That's the pushy way of doing it. But asking for feedback when something went wrong after a crash, for example, is super important. Providing data to the outside feeds, preview information is something that also is making things very successful nowadays. And allowing for people to extend the product to their needs is the biggest thing that I find the interfaces out there. So the monolithic interface to build one thing for everybody has been dead to me for a long, long time. Smaller interchangeable parts making up the interface for that need right now is where the success lies. And that's basically all I had. So thanks very much.